Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The rain fell in fine drops on the dark streets of Havenwood. It was a small town where everyone knew their neighbor, or thought they did. Police Captain John Mercer drove his patrol car, his face grim, gripping the steering wheel nervously. Mercer was known at the precinct for his arrogance and racial prejudices, a man convinced that justice should be administered according to his own judgment, not the law. That evening, a call from an anxious resident had triggered the storm. A suspected robbery had taken place in the upscale neighborhood of Maple Street. Mercer did not wait for a thorough verification. In his mind, the case was simple: the suspect was black, therefore necessarily guilty. He arrived at the house in a hurried rush. The lights inside revealed a spotless living room and smiling family photos on the walls. Mercer hurried to the entrance, handcuffs in hand, and ordered the man standing there, Marcus Lewis, to kneel. Marcus, calm and confident, raised his hands and said in a measured voice, "I assure you, officer, I did nothing." But Mercer, irritated by this calm and politeness which he could not understand, hissed under his breath, "Shut up and obey." Neighbors were beginning to gather on the sidewalk, whispering and filming with their phones. Mercer, indifferent, put Marcus in the back of his patrol car. Everything seemed normal to him, but he didn't know that this arrest would become the catalyst for his downfall. As he drove to the courthouse, Mercer didn't see the judgmental stares of passers-by, nor the cameras capturing his every move. In his mind, he already saw himself as a hero of law and order. But reality was about to hit him faster than he could have imagined. For Marcus Lewis was no ordinary citizen, he was a federal prosecutor, a man who knew the law better than anyone, and who was about to show him that justice, unlike prejudice, doesn't bend to prejudice. The tone was set, the danger palpable, and the scene was about to tip. The rain had intensified by the time Mercer arrived at the police station with Marcus in the back of his car. The sound of the windshield wipers and the purr of the engine seemed to underscore the oppressive silence. The station corridors, usually bustling with officers coming and going and the hum of radios, were eerily quiet that evening. Mercer dragged Marcus to the detention room, his boots clacking on the wet tiles. Marcus maintained an upright posture, head held high, silently defying the captain's arrogance. "Sit there," Mercer ordered sharply, pointing to a cold bench. "And don't move." Marcus complied calmly, without a word, while Mercer began filling out the arrest papers. But his documents contained glaring omissions: no verification of evidence, no requests for explanations from neighbors or witnesses. Everything had to be quick, efficient according to Mercer, but completely biased. A young officer, Daniel Hayes, watched the scene from the doorway. He knew Mercer's reputation, but part of him was embarrassed by the blatant injustice. He whispered to a colleague, "That guy, he shouldn't." But Mercer interrupted him with an icy stare. Daniel fell silent. Marcus, patiently, finally broke the silence. "Officer Mercer, I don't understand why I'm here. I have evidence that proves my innocence." Mercer sneered, contemptuously. "Proof? With everything I know about this neighborhood, there's no need for proof. You know what you did." Marcus felt Mercer's hostility like an invisible cage. But instead of responding with anger, he remained calm, observing every movement, every reaction, mentally noting Mercer's procedural errors. The captain, proud and confident, thought he had the situation under control. But Marcus knew that everything that happened in that room would be used against Mercer in court. That simple act of arrest would unleash a legal and moral storm that Mercer had never imagined. The next morning, the police station's holding cell seemed colder than ever. Mercer sat behind his desk, the arrest papers scattered in front of him. He reread his report over and over, convinced he had done an excellent job. In his mind, Marcus Lewis was already guilty, and justice was on his side. But the facts were quite different. Marcus, sitting calmly in his cell, observed every detail. He had noticed the omissions in the report: no witnesses contacted, no physical evidence properly recorded, and above all, no verification of his identity. For Mercer, these details were irrelevant. For Marcus, they were crucial. An officer entered discreetly and whispered to Mercer. "Captain, you should check the neighborhood cameras. Some footage seems to show that the man arrested did nothing wrong." Mercer shrugged, dismissively. "Images can lie. We just need to keep it here until court." Meanwhile, Marcus mentally noted the flaws in the procedure, ready to use them in court. His patience was unwavering. He knew that one mistake by Mercer would backfire on him. At lunchtime, Mercer ran into a colleague, Inspector Sarah Klein, who gave him a questioning look. "Are you sure you checked everything?" Mercer replied with a condescending smile. "I'm the captain. Trust me." But Sarah, knowing Marcus and federal law, sensed the impending disaster. She looked away, aware that Mercer would soon have to face reality. As Mercer continued preparing for the hearing, he was unaware that Marcus Lewis was not just any citizen. He was a federal prosecutor, an expert in criminal law, and every mistake Mercer made would be used against him. Marcus knew he didn't need to defend himself with anger or violence. The law, properly applied, would be enough to expose the captain's bias and injustice. Mercer's false sense of superiority, his blind confidence and his latent racism would precipitate his downfall, long before he realized the magnitude of his mistake. The next day, the morning sun was barely breaking through the heavy clouds when Mercer arrived at the courthouse with Marcus handcuffed in the back of the patrol car. He could already feel the attention of the passers-by and reporters who had gathered outside, but his pride prevented him from noticing the palpable tension in the air. For him, this case would be quick and easy. Upon entering the courtroom, Mercer adjusted his tie and stood proudly beside Marcus, who walked straight and impassively. The judges, clerks, and public watched the scene with curiosity. Marcus showed no sign of fear, his composure was almost defiant in Mercer's eyes. Judge Harold Bennett, a man in his 50s with a penetrating gaze, called the case. Mercer rushed to present his report, detailing the arrest with emphasis, deliberately omitting any mention of the missing evidence. Marcus raised his hand calmly. "Your Honor, I would like to address the court." Mercer chuckled inwardly. What could this wrongfully arrested citizen possibly be saying? Judge Bennett stared at him, surprised by the suspect's confidence. Marcus then produced a federal identification card and presented it politely. "I am Marcus Lewis, federal prosecutor in this region." An icy silence fell over the room. Mercer felt his hands grow sweaty. His colleagues exchanged worried glances, and even the judge frowned. Mercer stammered. I didn't know." But Marcus continued, without aggression, only with firmness. "Officer Mercer, your arrest is not only unjustified, but it also constitutes a violation of federal procedure. I am here to uphold the law, and I intend to ensure that justice is served." The entire room held its breath. Mercer's arrogant confidence crumbled before Marcus's authority and unwavering calm. Every word Marcus uttered exposed the captain's bias, and every heavy silence made Mercer feel increasingly vulnerable. At that precise moment, Mercer understood that he had made a monumental mistake, but he was still far from measuring all the consequences that this arrest would cause. The silence in the courtroom was almost palpable. Marcus's words echoed in the air like a preemptive verdict. Mercer, usually so self-assured, felt his confidence evaporate. Each second seemed to stretch out the moment when his mistake would be irrevocably exposed. Judge Bennett, frowning, addressed Mercer. "Captain Mercer, can you explain why you arrested Mr. Lewis without any verification of his identity or credible evidence?" Mercer stammered, red with shame. I thought I'd act quickly, for the safety of the neighborhood." The murmur of the audience grew into increasingly audible whispers. Journalists took notes, neighbors watched in disbelief. Mercer felt he was losing all the authority he thought he possessed. Marcus, unperturbed, calmly resumed speaking. "Your Honor, I am not only demanding that this arrest be overturned. I am also requesting that Officer Mercer's conduct be reviewed in light of his clear violations of civil rights." Mercer tried to retaliate, but his words rang hollow. He looked around and realized his colleagues wouldn't support him this time. The arrogance he'd worn as a shield was now useless. Judge Bennett raised his hand to impose silence. "Officer Mercer, you will have the opportunity to explain yourself later. For now, Mr. Lewis is free to move about." At these words, Marcus smiled slightly, but without arrogance. He knew that justice was on the side of truth and that Mercer would have to answer for his actions. Mercer, for his part, felt shame rising within him. He had underestimated Marcus, underestimated the law, and above all, underestimated the consequences of his own prejudices. In this courtroom, for the first time, he was no longer the one in power. This moment marked a decisive turning point. Mercer had just discovered that arrogance and racism can backfire on those who practice them, especially when faced with someone who understands the law better than he does. After the judge's decision to release Marcus, the courtroom was filled with a mixture of excited murmurs and curious glances. Mercer, still trembling inwardly, tried to maintain his authority, but every movement seemed clumsy and futile. Marcus, calmly removing his handcuffs, addressed Mercer in a composed but firm voice. "Captain Mercer, I understand that you thought you were doing the right thing, but your actions were based on prejudice, not the law." Mercer, unable to find an answer, looked away. Shame burned his cheeks, and a new feeling, one of vulnerability, took hold. Marcus continued. "You have a duty to protect all citizens, without distinction. Every mistake you make impacts not only your reputation, but also the community's trust in the police." The murmurs in the room turned to complete silence. Everyone watched the confrontation. Even Judge Bennett seemed impressed by Marcus's composure in the face of Mercer's arrogance. Marcus took a step forward, placing his hands on the court table. "I am a federal prosecutor. I know the laws better than anyone here. And I assure you that this unjustified arrest will not go unpunished." Mercer felt for the first time the true weight of his actions. His colleagues, previously silent, exchanged worried glances, understanding that they might soon have to testify against him or face internal investigations. At that moment, Mercer understood that the lesson Marcus was giving him wasn't just a professional reprimand, but a harsh reminder: prejudice and arrogance can ruin a career in an instant. Justice, embodied by Marcus, had just shown him that no position of authority protects one from one's own mistakes. Captain Mercer left the room that day with a new and bitter feeling, the realization that his racist and impulsive behavior had just placed him on a path from which he would not emerge unscathed. Barely out of the courtroom, Mercer felt the weight of anger and disbelief around him. His colleagues now looked at him with suspicion rather than admiration. Even some officers he thought loyal were whispering amongst themselves, aware that his career had just taken a dramatic turn. Judge Bennett, serious and resolute, immediately convened a meeting with the police station hierarchy. "Captain Mercer, your actions have been documented and are subject to an internal investigation. We must seriously evaluate the conduct of an officer who made a clearly unjustified arrest." Mercer, visibly nervous, tried to downplay the incident. I simply thought I was protecting the community." But his words rang hollow, and no defense could mask the fact that he had wrongfully arrested a federal prosecutor. Meanwhile, Marcus Lewis, calm and methodical, contacted the federal office to report the violation of his rights. Every detail of the arrest had been recorded and documented by witnesses, surveillance videos, and Mercer's own sloppy paperwork. Marcus knew exactly how to use the law to ensure justice was served. Captain Mercer was summoned to the police chief's office, where Inspector Sarah Klein, an indirect witness to the arrest, was waiting for him with a complete file. "Mercer, all your actions have been recorded. We need your full version, but you already know the situation is very serious." For the first time, Mercer felt the noose tightening. His arrogance no longer had any effect. Every gesture, every mistake, every racist prejudice was now exposed and ready to be used against him. Marcus, for his part, was calmly preparing his next steps. He wasn't interested in revenge, but in justice. The incident had not only put Mercer in a difficult position, but it also served as a reminder to everyone: the law doesn't bend to prejudice, and every citizen deserves to be treated fairly. That day, Mercer understood a painful truth: his career, his reputation, and his authority had just been severely compromised, and he had only himself to blame. A few days after the hearing, Mercer was summoned for a formal internal investigation. The atmosphere at the police station was heavy and silent, every officer seemed to avoid his gaze, and rumors about Marcus Lewis's wrongful arrest were already circulating everywhere. Inspector Sarah Klein, who knew the facts in detail, conducted the hearing professionally. She asked the most precise questions, confronting Mercer with each mistake he had made. "Captain Mercer, why didn't you verify Mr. Lewis's identity before making the arrest? Why didn't you consult witnesses or examine the available evidence?" Mercer, nervous, stammered out awkward answers, trying to justify his behavior with his duty to protect the community. Each explanation sounded empty and false, and he felt the disapproving stares of his colleagues upon him. Sarah then showed surveillance videos and documents from Marcus's file. "You see, all this evidence demonstrates that the arrest was not only unjustified, but also based on your personal biases." Mercer looked away, unable to respond. He understood that his career was in danger. The reality of his actions hit him hard. Not only had he humiliated a federal prosecutor in public, but he had also jeopardized the reputation of the entire department. Behind the scenes, Marcus cooperated with the investigation. His approach was measured and professional. He wasn't trying to humiliate Mercer, but to ensure that justice was served. Every document, every testimony, and every video reinforced his argument: the arrest was a flagrant violation of civil rights. Captain Mercer left the internal hearing with a mixture of anger, shame, and fear. For the first time, he realized that his arrogance and racism had concrete and immediate consequences. His world of authority and control had just crumbled, giving way to a reality he could no longer ignore. The entire precinct now knew that Mercer had crossed the line. His downfall was no longer a question of if, but of when. A few weeks later, the verdict of the internal investigation came in. Mercer was summoned to the office of the police chief, Captain Douglas Harper, to hear the official decision. The atmosphere in the room was icy, and every word spoken seemed to weigh like a hammer. "Captain Mercer," Harper began firmly, "your actions during the arrest of Marcus Lewis constitute a serious violation of police procedures and civil rights. You are suspended without pay for 6 months, and a recommendation will be made for a full disciplinary review that could lead to dismissal." Mercer remained silent, unable to utter a word. Shame overwhelmed him, and he felt bitterness rising. His reputation, built on years of authority and arrogance, was now in tatters. Meanwhile, Marcus Lewis continued his work, calm and determined. He had earned not only his freedom, but also the silent respect of everyone who had witnessed the case. His patience and mastery of the law had not only exposed Mercer, but also served as a reminder that no one, regardless of their rank, could presume to judge before the time came. At the police station, Mercer's colleagues whispered in hushed tones. Some looked at him with pity, others with anger. Even those who had previously been loyal to him understood that his behavior had embarrassed the entire department. Mercer, now suspended, spent his days reflecting on his mistakes. Every moment of his career now seemed tinged with regret. His racial prejudices, arrogance, and disregard for proper procedure had led him to a public humiliation and a loss of power he had never imagined. For Marcus, the case was a victory for justice. For Mercer, it was a painful and bitter lesson: power without respect for the law and without consideration for the rights of others leads only to downfall. After his suspension, Mercer found himself facing a reality he had never known: isolation. His colleagues, once intimidated or admiring, now avoided him. Even in the halls of the precinct, the whispers never stopped: "Did you see what he did?" or "How could he arrest a federal prosecutor?" Mercer tried to defend himself, attempting to explain that he had simply done his job. But his words sounded hollow and forced. His apologies only reinforced the impression that he didn't truly understand the gravity of his actions. The local community, having learned of the case through the media, had lost faith in him. The citizens he was supposed to protect now regarded him with suspicion and mistrust. Every patrol he conducted before his suspension was now a reminder of his failure and bias. Marcus Lewis, for his part, continued his work with dignity. His reputation remained intact, and his professionalism reinforced the idea that the law can correct abuses of power when it is properly applied. For Mercer, the situation was bitter. He understood that the authority and power he had arrogantly wielded could no longer protect him. Every interaction, every report, every decision was now scrutinized and judged. Trust, both within the department and with the community, had been irreparably shattered. The lesson was clear: arrogance and racial prejudice not only cause you to lose the respect of others, they also destroy your professional credibility and career. Mercer found himself alone with his mistakes, confronted with the harsh reality of his choices. The following weeks were difficult for Mercer. His suspension continued, and the disciplinary hearing was approaching. Every day at the precinct was a constant reminder of his mistake, his arrogance, and his underlying racism. Even his superiors now seemed suspicious of him. Marcus Lewis, for his part, had returned to his normal routine as a federal prosecutor. The case had strengthened his resolve to uphold justice, protect the rights of all, and remind everyone that no one, not even a police captain, is above the law. His reputation in the city and within the federal bureau remained intact, even enhanced by his composure and control of the situation. On the day of the disciplinary hearing, Mercer faced a panel of superiors and civilian officials. The evidence was overwhelming: falsified reports, wrongful arrest, and flagrant violations of civil rights. The outcome was inevitable. Mercer was dismissed from his position. For Mercer, the fall was complete. His once envied career had been destroyed in a matter of days. But beyond the professional setback, it was his pride and self-confidence that had been shattered. He finally understood that his racial prejudices and arrogance had been his greatest weakness. Marcus, after testifying professionally before the disciplinary panel, left the room calmly. He had proven that a commitment to justice, composure, and respect for procedures can triumph over arrogance and injustice. The community, colleagues, and even Mercer himself realized that this case left an indelible lesson: power without respect for laws and civil rights leads only to downfall, while justice and integrity always triumph. The town of Havenwood, now witnessing a clash between arrogance and justice, remembered this case as a brutal but necessary reminder that prejudice can never overshadow the truth.